We are? Okay. Good afternoon. This is the December 6, 2012 Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment meeting at Council Chambers. It is 1:30 p.m. If you are not here for a special exception, a variance, an oil and gas related case with the city, or an appeal from a zoning development regulation, you may be in the wrong building or the wrong room. The one thing we would ask is that you please turn off your cell phones today so we don't have any disturbance from cell phones. The second thing we need to take care of is approval of the minutes of November 1st, 2012.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Would you cast your vote? The minutes are approved. At this point in this stage, we oftentimes have people that are requesting continuances. Staff, do we have any requests for continuance today?
We have two today. We have item number 7, case number 13642 is requesting a continuance to January 3rd, and item number 15, case number 13598, is also asking for a continuance to January 3rd.
Good. Can I have a motion to approve the continuances for item number 7 and number 15, please?
So moved. Second.
Please cast your vote. You are on the January 3rd agenda. Also, we have item number 14. I saw that there was a request for a continuance by Mr. Rawls. Is Mr. Rawls here? Okay. We will move forward, I guess, then with our first business matter.
Item number 1, case number 13641. We have the consent docket.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's go ahead. I'll entertain a motion for approval of the consent docket, items C1 and 2.
So moved. Second.
Please cast your vote. It is approved. Now we'll go to the first case for the day, please.
Item number 3, case number 13599, application for special exception of Ricky Sluter to allow the continued use of a mobile home to serve as a temporary dwelling to relieve a medical hardship, located at 15403 South Post Road.
Would you come forward, please, sir? How are you today? Good. Mm-hmm. Would you first please state your name and address, and then please speak to your application?
My name is Ricky L. Sluter. My address is 15403 South Post Road, Oklahoma City, 73165.
All right, sir.
And we're applying for a special application for my parents to have a mobile home on our property.
Okay. Is the mobile home already there, or is
Yes.
it? Okay. And have you applied for something like this before in the past pertaining to that mobile home?
Yes, this is a renewal.
All right.
We've had it since 2005.
All right. And are you seeking it for a 1, 2, or 3 year period?
3, I believe.
Okay. Any?
I would ask staff, the staff report indicates we've got all the proper documentation.
Yes.
That being the case, I would move to approve. I second.
All right. So we're voting on the approval of a 3 year.
One question, is the same person living in the mobile home that was living in it?
Yes, it's my parents,
Okay.
mother and father. And my mother's here, but my father, he just not able to come.
And the application call for the 3 year. The request of the applicant is for 3 years.
All right. Please cast your vote at this time. You're approved, sir. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you very much.
Item number 4, case number 13638, request of D. Kyle Cole for a variance to the 15-foot side yard setback and the fencing regulations located at 2064 Northwest 48th Street.
Please come forward. And if you'd state your name and your address for the record, that'd be a big help.
Yes, sir. My name is D. Kyle Cole. I live at 2064 Northwest 48th Street, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73118.
Thanks. Could you speak to your application at this time, please?
Well, I've got several things that I can share with you. I don't want to burden you with time delays. However, basically what I'm trying to do, if you all have in your packet, I sent pictures with the application. I have further pictures that will explain the locations of buildings and so forth and fencing. What basically I'm asking can happen, I tried to get permits for the buildings and realized that I am over city allowance.
It's an encroachment issue of about
Yes,
2
sir.
feet, 5 inches?
Yes, sir.
All right.
It's
Are you-
not a huge encroachment issue.
Are you aware of anybody that's objecting or protesting your application here today?
No, no one thus far that I've seen has spoken. I also put in a petition that I circulated amongst the residents within the 300-foot radius
I saw
that
that.
showed 80%, we're at 79.98% in my favor of variance.
Great. Any questions from the board?
Well, we do have a protest letter in your file.
Okay.
Yes, and I have that. If we'd like to address that, I can go there first.
Okay.
I had a question. In your petition, you said in total I've spent over $10,000 to date on structures and related permitting, and that was my question. If you know, how did you get a permit if you were encroaching? And this came to
I
light
didn't.
when you built the structures, then sought the permit?
Correct.
Okay. And you're aware, I'm sure, that you got the cart before the horse?
Yes, sir.
Okay. He has made substantial improvements to his property, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
When I drove past the property, one of the concerns, I think, should be sight lines into oncoming traffic, and you're headed westbound and trying to turn either north or south onto Pennsylvania. And the structures that, are part of this application are not in the way, but one thing that I would just tell you is some of the plantings.
Yes, I've already been through, I have neighbors who have reported me for that, of which I've dealt with another branch of the city on the 25-foot site triangle. And if you notice, and I've got pictures to show you, of the 4 bushes on the north west corner, I've cut them to 2 foot and plan to remove them entirely so that there is no violation of
Yeah,
site
it
triangle.
makes it difficult when particularly if you want to turn south and you're
Right.
trying to cross north coming traffic.
Right, but my plan there, I was sitting thinking about it as I came, is just to remove those 4 plantings and leave the problem entirely of the site triangle.
But he's made many improvements to his property, and I applaud you for that, just, in the future.
Thank you very much.
Permit it first before you build it.
Yes, sir.
And I didn't receive in my packet the protest letter, but you're right, there is a protest letter, Jeff, that we received on November 29th. Are the Jones here today to speak in opposition to the application? Mr. and Mrs. Jones.
They make reference to blocking the view, and I think, the plantings and the foliage may be more of an issue for them. I think, what you've done enhances. It is in violation, but it does enhance, and I don't think it's...
Well, I'm no longer in violation as far as plantings are concerned. I had a ticket, and I've been through that whole... I've got 4 cases, at one time 5 cases against me. I've got 4 that are in city court that happened on the 28th that I desperately need this variance for. I was in here several years ago when I purchased a piece of property. It has always faced a western exposure, and that makes it a strange deal with the platting, according to the city, because it shows my front yard as being the 48th Street exposure, which it's never been. When I purchased a piece of property, it was a duplex. At one time, I had tried to get a special use development so that I could separate utilities. The neighborhood fought me, and I went through great pains and expense and lost to what was called a supermajority. And so this time I was like, I'm nervous today, to be honest with you. I'm uncomfortable being here. I feel like I've overbuilt the home. I've lived there 15 years. I have put the utmost care and thought processes behind all my buildings and construction and materials usage. I've tried very hard to make the piece of property an honorable piece of property for our neighborhood in hopes of increasing my value as well as others. I don't know what else to say other than any questions you have, and I can tell you now the letter from the gentleman that is opposition to me, he came very heavily against me at the last round of this. He lives 1 block to the north, 4 houses in, and I have pictures of what he views when he drives out of Mattern Drive and looks onto, if anyone would like to see them. I took them this morning so that you can see there is no sightline violation for him to get out of the street.
I think their primary objection, some people are just, generally object to, a level of activity at somebody else's home. And I think, the concerns about being able to see traffic clearly so that you can
Yes, and I
safely
did.
cross, and if those are being addressed, then I would make a motion to approve.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Would you please cast your votes at this time? You are approved, sir. Thanks for coming in
Thank you,
today.
gentlemen and ladies. Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas to you.
Item number 5, case number 13639, request of North Oklahoma County Mental Health Center for a variance to the required number of parking spaces located at 2625 General Pershing Boulevard.
Okay. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Would you state your name and address, please, sir?
J.C. Witcher, ADG Architects, 116 East Sheridan, Suite 100, in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
I'm here on behalf of North Care, which is the DBA of North Oklahoma County Mental Health, requesting...
It's a short name.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to say. And requesting a variance to zoning for parking. As you know from your packet, the Table 1 retail would have us with 79 parking spaces with the size of our building. And consultation with my client and his interview with operators and the people who will use the building, we feel like 30 is a much more reasonable number of parking spaces for the use of the building.
Good. Any questions from any of the board members?
Mental Health Crisis Stabilization Unit and Crisis Recovery Center, is it a private organization or a governmental organization?
North Care is a 501c3 charitable organization, and they will lease us to the Department of Mental Health for Oklahoma State Department of Mental Health to operate it.
If we approve this variance, would that variance follow the property? In other words, if the mental health people, if they left the facility, would the variance still be in place so that the next tenant or the next owner would still have the exemption?
Yes, it would run with the land unless you tied it to this particular use.
Such as they would have to come back in.
I think, I'd be most comfortable if we're going to consider approving the variance that we tie it to this use.
I agree. I agree with Jim
And this
because
applicant.
it does need to be tied to the use, because if it was ever for another purpose, there could be
Another
requirement
tenant,
for more
the
spaces.
nature of their business and the traffic in and out of their facility might be different.
And I think my client would be happy to have that amendment to the request.
So the variance will be limited to the use of the facility as a mental health facility. Is that what we're saying, everyone?
And by this owner.
And by this.
And by this particular owner. Do you own the property or are you a tenant?
North Oklahoma County Mental Health does own the property.
Okay.
Are you going to make a motion in that fashion, sir?
I will make a motion to that effect.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Would you please cast your votes? You're approved, subject to those limitations.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Item number 6, case number 13640, request of the Urban Group for a variance to the sidewalk requirement located at 2951 South Council Road.
How are you today?
Doing good. I'm Pat Mays. I'm with Cobb Engineering, representing Urban Group. The representative from Urban Group is here, and we're applying for a variance on the sidewalk.
For the purpose of the record, would you first give an address, please, along with your first and last name?
Okay. Pat Mays. I forgot my address. 421 East 25th, Blanchard, Oklahoma.
Okay. Please proceed.
We're applying for a variance along the property. The 29th Street was widened, and at that time that Oklahoma City widened it, additional right-of-way was not acquired for the intersection, and there is a turn lane there too. At the southeast corner of the property, from the back of the curb to the property pin, it's only 3 foot. And with the drainage structures along there, there's inadequate room to properly do the 5-foot setback for the sidewalk and do the sidewalk in that area. And then there's, along 29th Street, there's also a significant amount of poles along there, power poles, that makes it hard to design a sidewalk through there that actually is functional and safe. And to the east and to the west, there are no sidewalks along 29th too, so that's what my...
So north, south, east, west, no sidewalks? Is that what you're
Correct.
saying? Any questions from the board members?
I'll move approval. There weren't any protests, were there?
There's no protests that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
Are you aware of any protests?
No, sir.
I move approval.
I will second the motion.
All right, would you please cast your vote? You're approved, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen, ladies.
Item number 8, case number 13643, request of Studio Architecture for a variance to the required number of parking spaces located at 1780 West Memorial Road.
How are you today?
Just fine, how are you?
Good, good.
I'm Asa Highsmith, I'm with Studio Architecture, 1112 North Walker.
Good. Would you please present your application?
Sure. I'm representing the Church on the Rock on 1780 West Memorial. It's been a phased expansion that we've done for them. The first phase we did 2 years ago, and it was the main sanctuary. And by municipal code, the main sanctuary seating, it's one parking space for every 4 seats. And so we've got that, and what we're requiring the variance for here is our phased work right now is actually a children's addition. And so it's kind of a children gathering space, you know, during the main service that the children will go into. I think it's very typical for a lot of churches. But whenever we submitted for our building permit, they asked us to provide parking. We felt that, you know, the parking that was provided for Phase 1 is kind of the parking for the church. The children that this addition serves are not of driving age, and it's not an addition to the congregation size, it's existing congregation. So,
I have a question. Do you have additional land available for additional parking?
yes, sir.
In the future? Because one thing I would say is, you know, the use as a children's facility, of course, they don't drive and you don't need those parking spaces. But in the event that church continues to grow and the use of that structure, you know, changes and becomes an adult function, it would necessitate, I think, you know, some additional parking. And I think you should be prepared for the fact that you may have to add parking spaces at some point.
Sure.
If we grant this variance request, I mean, we've allowed them to not have that required parking. And if the use of the facility changes, then, you know, it's just, you're going to have more people trying to park than you've got room for.
Sure. I think we could limit the scope of the variance to as long as it's used as a children's center.
How are you going to enforce that? I mean, how do you do that, though? I don't know that we can, I mean, how can we do that?
You just make it conditional the way you did on the previous one, so that the variance is so long as this new structure is being used as a children's facility, and then if it changes and there is a complaint that prompts a new application.
But they don't have to do anything. They simply, you know, the use evolves over a period of time. They don't have to come to anybody to ask permission. I mean, it's just, you know, and they're going to find themselves in a situation where they may be tight in terms of parking for the people that are trying to attend functions at the church.
I agree.
And at that point, they're going to begin to you know, but I don't think they're not required to come back to
Well,
the
right now,
city.
they're required to have 250 parking spaces. They have 270. And so if you'd like, would you be willing to limit the variance to so long as that facility is used as a children's facility?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's meaningless, but I mean, I'll concur. I don't think there's any enforcement, and I think, you know, the logical consequence would be of changing the use of that facility. They're going to need more parking, and they're going to pave more of the land they already own.
If it would help any, this is, again, a phased expansion, and we also have a kind of a larger Phase 2 that's upcoming that grossly expands our current parking. This was just, it's kind of a temporary addition until we do the full master plan.
The variance would apply to the site plan as they've submitted it. So if they came in to increase the size of the sanctuary, they would still need to provide parking for that expansion.
JJ, can I ask a question, clarify? So what you're saying is, if this program leads to them expanding their congregation and mission, they would have to be required to come back here to address that issue?
The variance they're asking for is for the situation that they've presented today. But it won't have any effect. If they came in to double the sanctuary, they would need to increase the parking to meet that sanctuary size.
I'm comfortable with that as a check on it.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion with some type of condition, or is it just a motion?
I'll make a motion with the condition for the specific use of it as a children's center.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes at this time. You are approved. Thanks for coming today.
Item number 9, case number 13644, request of D&D Design and Manufacturing for a variance to the sidewalk requirement located at 5701 South Rockwell Avenue.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's Robin Davidson. I'm the owner of D&D Design at 5701 South of Rockwell in Oklahoma City.
All right, would you speak to your application at this time, please, sir?
Yes, sir. What we'd like to do is build a new building, but we're trying not to have to put a sidewalk along Rockwell. If you look at the site plan right now, there's a fence along Rockwell, and there's a lot of cedar trees and stuff along that we would have to take out and then replace. They'll move our fence, and it's a pretty good task to do that. We've been there since 1988, and there's really not been hardly any foot traffic along Rockwell, so we're in hopes that you would grant us this variance.
So it's because of the lack of foot traffic and aesthetics, you have to remove trees to do it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Any questions from any of the board?
This is analogous to case number 6, correct?
It is.
Motion for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Would you please cast your votes at this time? You're approved, sir. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much.
Item number 10, case number 13645, request of Ivan Denny for a variance to access to an approved street in the lot frontage requirements located at 7616 East Memorial Road.
Good afternoon.
Hello, I'm David Denny, 2649 Michael Drive, and I'm here to help my dad, Ivan Denny. He's hard of hearing.
Okay.
I'll help him represent.
Always good to help your dad.
Well, thank you. All right, as far as the property is concerned, they bought it roughly, 6 months ago? Yes. With the desire of building their retirement home on it, and we found out in trying to pull a permit for an accessory building to be built by Morton that we could not get a building permit on it due to the fact that it does not have 150-foot minimum to Memorial, as well as access, approved access coming back to the property since it's landlocked.
Okay. I've looked at the staff report on this, and I just want to make sure everybody's clear on this, that if this variance were granted, you'd be allowed to or be able to obtain building permits, but it doesn't guarantee that you will have access. Are you familiar with that and understand that?
Yes.
And that could lead to litigation to try to attempt to obtain that access.
Correct. Before they purchased the property, they went ahead and did a reciprocal driveway easement for all 4 of the property owners to stay with those properties. So there have been things taken and steps taken to guarantee access.
Okay.
But those agreements are, I mean, any agreement can be rescinded or broken or violated, and it's just, I think what Mark is wanting to make sure that you're very clear is that you're subject to, the goodwill that exists between you and the people that control access to the other property. And if something in the future happens, you may not be able to get to your own property after making these improvements.
Okay.
If that's acceptable to you, I would make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second, please?
Second.
Would you please cast your votes? You're approved.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
Item number 11, case number 13646, request of 4D construction for a variance to the required number of parking spaces located at 2703 Southwest 59th Street.
How's it going?
My name is Justin Dill, D-I-L-L, 5300 North Dewey, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73118.
Would you speak to your application at this time, sir?
Sure. We're proposing to build a Dollar General at this location. When we're looking for a variance from the required number of parking spaces per the city code of 46. Nationally, for this prototypical building, that's the prototype plan, and page 2, I believe, is our site plan. They require 30 parking spaces. We believe they know the best interest of their business, and that 46 is an excessive amount.
Yeah, I noticed two things, is that Dollar General requires a minimum of 30 spaces, and that there's been some precedent in the past where a variance has been granted under similar circumstances.
Yes, sir. There was one built at 3820 South Portland last year that has 31 parking spaces.
And is this application on behalf of Dollar General, or are you a franchisee, or?
Dollar General's, all their stores are corporately owned.
Okay.
We're the landowner and the developer. This store particularly has a 15-year lease with Dollar General.
Gotcha. Okay. Any questions from the board?
So the configuration allows, they can only put 34 lots or parking spots on that lot?
Yes,
And it
sir.
requires
The way Dollar
46
General's truck access is in and out of Southwest 59th Street, we believe to go to a more parking, we would start to impede the flow of traffic both on 59th Street and on our property.
Any other questions? It would be the pleasure of one of the board members to make a motion to approve or not approve this.
So moved.
Is that for approval? All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes at this time. You are approved, sir. Thanks for
Thank
coming
you
today.
so much.
Item number 12, case number 13648, request of Michael Billings for a variance to the location requirements of the ABC3 Club with Alcohol District regulations located at 5215 Northwest 10th Street.
Hello. I'm Kim Cathy. I'm with Rubenstein and Pitts, 1503 East 19th Street, Edmond, Oklahoma 73013. And we're attorneys for the tenant, Midway. And they're requesting a variance for the requirement. It's an ABC3 that they're applying for, and they needed at least 300 feet between their, I guess it was their outer perimeter wall and a residentially zoned area. There is a tire shop, I guess you can see in that, that's the residentially owned. It's always been residentially zoned, I think, but it's also always been a tire shop. Right.
I have a question for staff. I mean, we just heard a case like this where somebody had let their license expire, and they had to come before us. It didn't involve the 300-foot radius that this case does. Is that a factor in this case also, or I know it's not a part of the application, but...
No, and it was a similar, but it was a different, they were asking for a different variance. They were asking for variance to the cessation of a non-conforming use. And this applicant is asking for a variance to a separation requirement so they can get the proper zoning to come into compliance.
But the facility's been there for a lengthy period of time, correct?
That's correct.
As far as we can tell from the early 70s.
And there are no child care centers or churches or anything other than this one residentially zoned property that's been an auto shop for years and years and years?
That's correct.
And we're not aware of any protests? None of your neighbors have come up and objected or?
No, not at all.
And the thing, what happened that triggered her appearance here today on behalf of her client is the fact that the license expired, am I correct?
Yes. It's my understanding, correct?
Yeah, they're just trying to get the ABC3 compliance now. It wasn't a problem, but I guess there's a new city ordinance that changed the way that it's measured. The separation is measured, so that was the cause for the ABC3 having to get this variance.
We have a motion to either approve or disapprove
I'll
this?
make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Would you please cast your votes at this time? You're approved. Thanks for coming in.
Item number 13, case number 13649, request of Stephen Woody for a variance to the communication tower regulations regarding the minimum distance requirement, the maximum height limit, and special permit requirement located at 5850 Northeast Grand Boulevard.
How's it going?
Good afternoon. Steve Woody, 1010 Potter Avenue, Rockwall, Texas. And I'm here today to ask for those variances to allow us to construct a new communication tower to replace an existing tower that Verizon Wireless owns at 1906 Northeast 57th. And you can see it on the map there next to our subject tower. And
May I interrupt you for just a second to ask staff a question? In the staff report under unfavorables, it says it is the intent of the ordinance that towers not meeting the conditions of the ordinance are land use decisions. and that should be reviewed by the Planning Commission and decided by City Council. Are we still, I mean, is it our place to consider the variance request before Planning Commission and City Council consider this matter?
No, if you consider the variance request, it will not go to Planning Commission or City Council. The ordinance, the tower's a conditional use. If you meet all the conditions, you just get a permit and build your tower. If you happen not to meet any one of the conditions, the ordinance says you need to obtain a special permit. That's reviewed by Planning Commission and heard by City Council. They have two issues here. One is they're too close to an existing tower, which is a tower that will come down when this one's built. And then they're requesting that since they don't meet that condition, that they not have to go to the Planning Commission and City Council and get the special permit. So they're requesting a variance to the separation of the two towers, one of which will come down, and that they not have to go before and get a special permit.
Can you speak to that aspect of your request for a variance, why we are not going through the Planning Commission, City Council approval route?
Because I was told to do this.
I got you.
I'm doing what I was told.
All right.
Come here and plead my case.
You're coachable.
So, yes, I'm very coachable.
All right.
So, that's basically, if the tower's going to come down, they need a replacement. Verizon's asked me to build another one. We've located a spot that we can do this. T-Mobile is also on the tower, the existing tower. They're going to come over too as well. So it's going to basically keep the coverage that's already there. The Verizon tower will come down after that. The other thing was the height restriction in, I think it's an urban planning district, conservative district, Northeast Gateway urban conservative district. There's already towers in that district. So we're not introducing anything new, any new elements.
Are you aware of the protest letter that we've received?
I did, and I did look at that, and I can address those issues. I think the biggest one is addressed by the fact that the other tower's coming down.
And they have some concerns about how the area is kept, and it sounds like housekeeping issues.
Well, that's a landowner. The other landowner had some issues there. I've been to that site, and there was trash and stuff strewn around. But the big issue is they don't have a gate down where the access drive is, which we would. So, we won't have anybody. We don't want anybody driving in and out of our property. So,
basically, if it's approved, you're going to have one tower.
Yes.
And it's going to be just 10 feet taller than the old tower.
Right. We're going to be dropping the tower. I'm making all this noise here, but the elevation is 10 foot lower, so we're asking for a 10-foot higher tower from 130 to 140. No lights, same structure, look the same.
The party that's protesting has some health concerns too, and they're saying that the new tower will be actually closer to their residence. Can you tell me whether that's true?
I don't know where their residence is. If it's on Grand Avenue or the other side of that, we're 600-700 foot away from any residence that way. I know to the east there's one home that we're actually going to be further away.
They're at 5701 Northeast Grand.
I don't know where 5701 Northeast Grand is. I know where the homes are.
How far west are you moving the tower?
156 feet northwest. The only house that's within 500 foot of us is east, so we're actually moving away from it. There are homes on the other side of Grand Avenue, but again, those are probably 700, 800 feet away. To the south, we're 600 feet away from any homes. The tower will be surrounded by trees that are already there. We're going to leave as many as we can. So the compound itself will be totally shielded by the existing growth.
So the new tower will be farther away from Martin Luther King Avenue, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In looking at the site map, we believe the resident who wrote the protest letter is directly west and perhaps just a little bit north. You see Grand is curving around, and you see 56th Street running west off of Grand, and that would be 57th Street, so it would be just west. So, in fact, the new tower would be a little closer to this.
A little, yes.
And I think they just, wanting some assurance that there are no overt health risks.
Well, I think the FCC has put out tons and tons of data that show cell phones, are not a hazard to human beings, and I would just have to point to the experts that have said that over and over. It's plenty of information out there, plenty of tests. The existing tower's been there since 1996, so, putting that tower down and moving one 156 foot closer really shouldn't make any difference, I wouldn't think. But I'm not an expert on RF and what it does to the human body, but there are plenty of studies that show it does not do anything hazardous.
Any further questions by any of the board members? I'd entertain a motion at this time.
I have one question before we move on.
Sure.
By doing this the way...
There's two.
I appreciate that. Rita, by us approving it this way, is there any type of procedural things that we've circumvented, or is this the proper protocol given the circumstances?
It's proper. JJ and I were just discussing that, actually, and he might want to speak to this a little bit more. But the idea is that you're not expanding your use, changing your use, or anything like that. They already have a tower. They're going to tear that down if you approve them having the new one. They'll tear it down. They'll build another one that is somewhat taller. And if you didn't do that, the process would be that it would have to go to the Planning Commission and to the City Council. If you approve this use of this tower, which is the same thing, just moved over and a bit taller, then the process allows for that.
I'm comfortable with that. I just want to double check that. I'll make a motion for approval.
Right. And before I second it, I think we've got some protesters that would like the opportunity to speak.
Okay. Do we have someone in opposition here today? Oh, yes, please come up. Would you please state your full name for the record and your address?
Sure. My name is Rosalind Paulden. I live at 5824 North Rhode Island.
Okay.
My property is just west of where we're talking about here, and I wasn't clear whether the question of the health issues are solved. I mean, this tower has been there, but we're talking about one even larger. Is that going to affect us? We need to know that.
I think what the applicant is telling you is, there's substantial government oversight of these towers, and they're constructed in communities all across the country, and that, any health risks would have been identified and dealt with, and that, they wouldn't be built if they weren't considered safe for the people that were in the surrounding neighborhoods.
Okay.
So I think you can rest assured that
That is not
there's
going to
no
be a health
increased health
issue?
risk.
And I think the applicant would like to speak to that and answer your question, if that's okay.
Sure.
It's not necessarily bigger, it's 10 foot larger. The equipment, the antennas will all be the same. So nothing as far as RF energy is going to change. It's going to be the exact same signals. We're basically just taking the pole that the antennas mount to and moving it over 156 feet.
So with it being larger, is this giving us better reception?
No, it's actually going to offset because we're actually dropping the tower in elevation, so it's going to be about the same. The tower currently sits at an elevation that's 10 foot higher than the new tower will sit at. So we're asking for that 10 foot increase, so it'll really be about negligible. But as far as the FCC goes, they've actually said that governing bodies can't even hear a petition or a complaint on health issues because they've ruled it out so extensively. And again, cell phones, I'm sure you have a cell phone. We all have
Me
them.
too.
These towers, once you start looking for them, you'll notice they're everywhere.
Okay.
And as far as being large, it's not going to look any different than what's there already.
Okay, so we just received the letter as of
Courtesy from the county, or from the city, I'm sorry.
to say they're over there doing it.
That's what we're doing.
All right. No way for us to, go
That
ahead.
would-
You were going to say something.
That would not preclude you from taking
I'm
any...
sorry, I can't hear you.
My mic is never, how about this? Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you.
This would not, the action by this body would not preclude you taking any action you felt necessary later, but it wouldn't be a matter for review by this body, any health concerns. If you had some later and you thought you needed to do something regarding the company that installed the tower, then that would be a separate and private matter, but it's not a matter for review by this body. as he's indicated.
Do you have any idea who we'd go to in the event that we needed?
It would not be reviewable by a federal, state, or local entity. It would be a private lawsuit that you would file against whomever caused the harm. So if you felt that some health concern arose because of the tower being placed where it was, then it would be a private cause that you would file against the owner or placer of the tower with your own private counsel.
Okay, but not until something happened could we do anything?
Well, because there's no harm at this point, and no shown harm. They have done some studies that have shown things, and, you know, all of us have heard that it is a problem, it's not a problem, and that kind of thing.
Right,
If you did have harm, then a private lawsuit would be the way to address it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for coming today. We appreciate it.
I am prepared to second the motion if there is no other discussion and no one else who wishes to speak.
There being no other discussion, would you please vote at this time? You are approved.
Item number 14, case number 13651, request of Scott Parker for a variance to the maximum number of permitted signs, the maximum square footage, and to allow signage in the public right-of-way and site triangle located at 222 Northwest 15th Street.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I need to make a record. For the past year, I have served as the chairman of the Board of Trustees at St. Luke's United Methodist Church, which is the applicant in question, and my wife and I have been members there for approximately 4 years, so at this time I need to recuse myself.
Appreciate you advising us of that, and we will call you when the matter is concluded. Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Anthony McDermott, and I'm standing in for my colleague Scott Parker today. I am a principal of TAP Architecture. We're at 415 North Broadway Avenue, Oklahoma City.
Would you, well, I guess the first matter that we need to make sure we're clear on this, have you seen the letter from Matt Rawls?
Yes, sir.
That came in? Have you had any discussions with the Heritage Hills Historical Preservation, Inc. group?
We have reached out to everyone identified here with a letter from the church offering to explain further what our intentions are.
All right. Is Mr. Rawls here at this time? Okay. I know we have several people here that want to speak in opposition, so what we'll do at this time is let you speak on behalf of your application, and then we will hear from the opposition, and then you can come back up and respond if that's okay.
Very well.
Thanks.
Thank you. The big picture, if you will, is the church's attempt to, first of all, identify their large and complex property holdings in the area, and to substantially consolidate the way the signage looks around the church. The church has been there since 1957. It's in the corner of a historic preservation area, district. HP zoning is to the north and HP zoning is to the west, so the church lies on the southeast corner of that district. The church has been there since 1957, but since 1957 has acquired adjacent properties with a variety of zonings. The church proper, the majority of the church buildings actually are located on the block, on one block, but the church also owns 4 parking lots on adjacent properties with various zonings. So it's complex in that there are multiple zonings involved. It's a very large property, and it has parking lots distributed around it. What the church would like to do is be able to identify its component parts and its parking lots and its ownership of the parking lots so there's a lot better wayfinding to the complex. We've made application. This project has been thought about and planned and designed now for a long time. We have been before the HP Commission. The protest letters I see are substantially the same protests as we heard before the HP Commission. and the HP Commission voted to approve the application with some caveats, with some changes that the church is willing to make. And so that, without going into a lot of detail, that's a kind of an overview.
And from what I can tell, Rita, we have 3 people who are here today to speak in opposition, and I don't have any particular order. Whoever wants to speak first, feel free to come up, and we will let you respond after those in opposition speak. There's a Brian Dolan that's here. There is a Bernadine Modell and a Janet McKenna.
Be the third one, Janet.
You're the lucky
McKenna.
one that gets to go first?
Sure, why not?
All right.
And my husband and I reside at 321 Northwest 14th Street. So that sits on the north side of the street between Hudson and Harvey. We bought our home in April after 40 years of admiring that neighborhood. And immediately we will be affected. Our view, there will be 4 signs. And if I understand the size of the signs, they will be 2 foot wide, and with the base, they would be 4 foot high. So in less than a half block distance, there are 4 signs just to mark a parking lot, which is to the very east of us, and one across to the very south of us. And one of them would be right on our property line, right next to it. So when there's reference by the church to their structures and parking lots as a campus, it doesn't give it any significance to their property. I feel that their proposed signs marking their territory is excessive. The proposed signs will not serve the historic neighborhood. The number, the size, and the appearance of the signs, to me, will only disrupt its beauty, clutter its landscape, and diminish its uniqueness. And those are all reasons that my husband and I love this neighborhood. We've noticed that non-residents, the walkers, the joggers, the bicyclists, they all appreciate the peacefulness, the beauty, the location. It offers them safety. To me, those signs intrude upon all of that. And when we decided a year ago to move, we never considered any neighborhood but Heritage Hills. It's a jewel of Oklahoma City, no news to any of us here. And everything should be done to preserve it. And I just feel that excessive church signs do not serve to preserve it. If anything, it degrades it. Others are on 15th will be affected by their view, I understand, to be segmented sign, 2 feet wide, and it will span 34 feet. And then also in that same area, if I understand this map, there'll be a sign, I think it was implied about the size of a piece of plywood panel, 4 feet by 8 feet. When you put it on its base, it's going to tower far more than 8 feet. And with all the signs that are already in place for the church, I just don't understand why we have to look at more signs, the size of the signs. They'll all be in pretty much black granite, except for one on the Art Center will be metal and mounted on the building itself. But I'm sure you can see how many signs are already in place at St. Luke's. And marking their territory with more signs, I don't know what good it'll do to mark parking lots. Everyone knows their parking lots. They're adjacent to the church. I'm sure we will still have the church-going people on Sundays on 14th, and we've seen it on 15th, we've seen it on Harvey and Robinson. People do not utilize the parking lots. They want to make a quick getaway, and so they park on the streets anyway. So putting a sign at an entry of a parking lot, is that really going to serve the purpose that they say it is for?
The one thing, we balance many times competing interests and different perspectives, and we have had a precedent in the past to help churches with their traffic flow from a safety standpoint and to help people find the right place quickly and safely. And so I guess the question I'd have of you is, did you attend the HPC meetings, and did you express your views at that time?
No, we had just moved in at the end of May, and we were not notified of such. It's probably not on record that we were new owners of the home.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to present to the board at this time?
No, I'm sure there will
We
be
have other people raising their hands back here, so...
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine, that's great. All right, so Ms. McKenna spoke. We have Mr. Dolan. Would you like to speak, Mr. Dolan?
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Dolan, live at 227 Northwest 15th Street, which is directly across the street from St.
Thanks for
Luke's.
coming today. Are you neighbors of Ms. McKenna?
Not close neighbors. She's on 14th, a block and a half away.
Okay, all right.
First of all, I guess, thank you for letting me speak and have some questions, because there's some numbers shown up on the board here that are not consistent with those that were sent out in the notice letter, namely signs 6, 9, and 10. And so I guess want to understand if there is an intent to put signs at those locations.
All right, so your first thing that you would like to point out to the board pertains to signs at number 6, number 9, number 10, correct?
Correct. The ones I can see up on the screen aren't on my notice letter.
Okay. I follow you.
Okay. And so I guess we'll get an answer on that shortly then, right?
They will respond to that.
Okay. Second item, I did attend the first HP Commission meeting and had turned in a letter associated with that, and I believe that was forwarded on to the Board of Adjustment. I don't know if you've seen that or not. Okay.
We've seen all the letters.
Okay. Was unable to go to the second meeting, and as we pointed out in our letter, when we look at the way the ordinances are written, the HP Commission can only approve signs that conform to the sign ordinance. And so if the signs don't conform to the sign ordinance, I don't see how the HP Commission could have approved the application.
Mr. Dolan,
Yes.
I should let you know that the review of the Historic Preservation Commission is a different kind of review than this body. Their review is whether or not the use plan is compatible with the historic district.
Understand.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thirdly, want to make sure that everyone understands that there are a lot of existing signs around the property. They've never been marked on anything that we've been given from a review process, and don't understand if the signs that are being proposed are being evaluated within that context, or they're being evaluated as standalone signs that are getting a variance based on their own size and location without consideration of the existing signs, which our understanding is that the existing signage should be taken into consideration when any approvals are given.
Okay.
As mentioned before, this is a residential area. Most of it's residentially zoned, and as such, the intent of the sign ordinance is to have a minimal impact on the residential areas around it. And as the previous speaker mentioned, the neighborhood has a lot of nice aesthetic features, and and the signage will only serve to obstruct those and reduce the quality of the views and the atmosphere in the neighborhood, in our opinion. And so, you know, as an example, there are other churches in Oklahoma City that have very similar circumstances that have grown up over time, have parking lots they've acquired. You know, Westminster Presbyterian Church on Chartel does not have signs all over all its parking lots that are distributed around it similar to this. The Temple B'nai Israel on Pennsylvania, same sort of situation, big campus, not a lot of signs all around that. And there's a new, I don't know the exact name, but the Muslim Cultural Center over at 50th and May, again, big campus, but not a lot of signs all around that say, these are our parking lots, this is where we are. And so, you know, we think that, you know, there's a lot of churches that function very well without the need to add all these signs around their parking lots and their buildings. And you know, the applicant discussed, you know, trying a campus, and at the Furch HP Commission, he mentioned the fact that they were looking at this like a hospital in trying to provide better signage and wayfinding. Well, a hospital is an institutional occupancy, which is very, very different from something that sits within a residential occupancy. And so I think those are very different situations, in trying to use that as a model is probably not appropriate. And I guess, lastly, you know, there's the issue with this being on public property, and a lot of these signs are proposed to be within the public right-of-way, which obstructs views coming in and out of the parking lots, and in our opinion, reduces safety of pedestrians around vehicles that are moving in and out of the parking lots. And I guess that's our concerns, and obviously we're opposed to this variance.
And just so the record's clear, when you say our concerns, are you speaking individually here today or on behalf of the Heritage Hills Historical Preservation, Inc., or what capacity?
My wife and I.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure our record's clear.
Yes. No, I'm not a member of the board.
Okay. And you may have said this, and maybe I missed it, but when HPC approved this, were you present?
I was not able to attend the second meeting, no.
Yes, sir. Okay. All right. We really appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
We have one other person that provided a protest, and that's Bernadine Madole. Did I say that correctly? Take your time. How are you today? Good.
How are you all?
You may have to pull that microphone down just a little bit. We're doing fine.
How's that?
That's perfect.
That work? Okay. I'm Bernadine Madole. My residence is 2325 North Youngs Boulevard in Oklahoma City, 73107. I own the property that is southeast of the church's property. I'm right on the corner of Northwest 14th and Robinson. So I'm not in
Okay, so you're 2 or 3 blocks to the south, correct?
No, I am kitty corner from the Hefner Mansion.
Okay.
Right across from their art education building.
Right.
Okay, on 14th and Robinson.
Okay.
I've been there for a long time. And that area is not part of the historic preservation. I was at one meeting as a guest, initial meeting, but was never notified by anybody about any further action for the historic preservation. I'm very puzzled about the need for wayfinding. I'm out there a lot. I've never seen anybody wander around the church wondering what to do. There are a lot of people who do wander around the church who are indigent, homeless, panhandlers, some crazies. But they're not seeking entrance to the church. As far as I can tell, nobody's ever had any trouble finding the parking lots. It's flat, there are no curves, there are no hidden recesses that you have to negotiate. It's very clear. Their lots are very beautifully appointed. So it's not hard to find them, day or night. The problem I have with these signs, number one, is that you cannot help but think that they are tombstones. The way they are placed upright, their dimensions, So when you look at their plan up there, you have 8 tombstones in an area of, from Robinson to the middle of the next block. You have 8 signs. Plus, there is an existing sign in that little curly key place there, which has just gotten damaged. I'm very sorry about that. I don't know what your plan is for replacing that. But in the original plan, it would have been there in addition to the black granite stones. So that means 9 signs along the public right-of-way within a block and a half. That seems excessive to me and really, truthfully, unnecessary. We've not been shown or told, or I don't know about it, how these signs relate to the existing plantings. There are
Existing what? I couldn't hear you. I'm so sorry.
the plantings,
Yes.
bushes, trees, whatever,
Yes.
which pretty much already demark the parking areas. The problem with the traffic, now I generally go, when I go to my business, on Hudson, east on 14th Street. If there are functions at the church, it's very tricky. Even if you can see through those plantings, people can appear in front of you very quickly. And when there are a lot of people and there is a lot of traffic, it is already difficult. I can't imagine the difficulty trying to see around or through black granite slabs. So I really oppose the putting of those on public land. Plus, a few years ago, they put the fiber optic cables on the south side of 14th Street. I'm sure the architects have looked into whether or not putting these things in, I mean, with the size, they're going to have a sizable depth, I would think, to support, whether there's any conflict about that. Also, I think there's a water line and other utility things. When I come east on 14th Street from Harvey, the sight lines at the corner of Robinson and 14 are terrible. My building has been hit twice that I know of because of accidents have spun cars over across the street. There have been other accidents that have been out in the middle of the street and on 14th on either side. I think the sign that there on the corner is going to complicate the sight lines there.
And so we're talking about at 14th and Robinson? Is that
Correct, when you
Right, I'm
go
with you.
east. Now, one letter I saw in the file talked about the problem sight lines when you go west on 14th Street. I don't do that very much, so I can't speak to that. But I do know the difficulties at the east corner of 14th Street and Robinson. So I strongly suggest, again, we're not shown any kind of architectural rendering that lets us know exactly where that big sign for the mansion is going to go. Right now, the way it looks, it's going to be a very bad hazard problem as far as sight is concerned. I also have a security issue with these signs. There's a lot of activity at night around there. People walking their dogs that are neighbors. There certainly are lots of joggers and bicyclists. There are also a lot of people who have jobs downtown and are returning home or are going to their jobs from their home further north. These people regularly use these streets. So I think having all of these thick, big signs around adds to a security problem, and it's tough enough there anyway. I think that's really I do think the codes are there for a reason. I don't think they're arbitrary, and I'm assuming the reasons are security and safety for the public. I think that's the major concern. Outside of the fact that this is going to create an overall atmosphere, I think it will, that is really, in my mind, funereal. I don't really want to see that every day. And I'm sure the hospital people also don't want to see all of those tombstones.
And just so the record's clear, you're here in your individual capacity as a property owner, correct? You're not here on behalf of any association or
No.
homeowners association?
I'm in no man's land.
I got you. And then, how long have you owned your property?
Since 73, the best I can remember.
Good. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add to your presentation?
No. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you for coming today. All right. It appears we have some additional people that want to speak. There is a Ms. Shannon Rundell. Thank you. How are you today? I'm good. Would you please state your
Shannon
full
Rundle,
name?
431 Northwest 20th, Heritage Hills.
Thank you.
And I am on the board of Historic Preservation Incorporated, the governing body for Heritage Hills neighborhood. And I know that Matt Rawls, our president, wrote a letter, I think mostly asking for more discussion with the group. I'm going to introduce in a minute Marva Ellard, who's head of our Heritage Hills Preservation Review Committee, which anything that's going to the commission comes under that. And she has extended an invitation to the St. Luke's group to meet with the neighborhood and with the Preservation Review Committee, and that has not been responded to.
And what is her name again, please?
Marva Ellard, I think she's the next speaker up. But I'm not going to say a lot. I will give everybody a history lesson, which I'm real good at these days. In 1969, Heritage Hills, with the help of Mayor Shirk, was put under a historic preservation ordinance. The reason was commercial encroachment. Simple. Commercial encroachment. And I think I hadn't thought about this really until just a minute ago, but St. Luke's has been a wonderful neighbor to our neighborhood for many, many years. And we've always just talked it out. We've had discussions with Bob Long, the minister. It's always been for mutual benefit. And it's just, I think it's a little different this time for whatever reason. But I think that, this is a residential neighborhood, and we are under HP, and I think these, the guidelines for that should be honored. Anyway, I'm going to introduce Marva Ellard now.
For purposes of the record, were you at the HPC meeting?
I was not. I was out of town. I was not able to go. But again, I'm not sure how far we thought that was going to go, because I think we truly thought they were going to meet with the neighborhood before it went further. And remember that, the commission is made up of people who certainly don't all live in Heritage Hills, and some don't even live in HP districts. So that was, I think we thought that was kind of a premature meeting, or preliminary meeting might be a better word. Anyway.
Thanks for coming today. How are you?
I'm good. Chairman Stonecipher, I'm Marva Ellard, 1521 North Chartel, and I've been at every meeting, so I'll be happy to talk to you about anything. I'm chair of the Neighborhood Preservation Design Review Committee, and that's how I first obtained knowledge about it, because there was an application that went to the HP Commission. I took it to what's called the Associate Board and explained to them what was going on, and then they asked me to take it to what we call HPI, which is Historic Preservation, Inc., which is the governing body of the neighborhood.
Is that what I would call the homeowners association itself? Or is
pretty
it
much.
Yes,
It's a 50-member board
Sure.
that spends the money, does the budget, plans the activities for the neighborhood. And
Well, you all do a very nice job.
well, there's a lot of people that work really hard. So Matt wrote a letter asking, basically, I think, for some time to
visit with St. Luke's. Reverend Greenwald and I have talked a couple of different times. The church has sent a letter out to a lot of people in the neighborhood. I don't think everybody, but a lot of people in the neighborhood. And this is just my opinion, and like Shannon said, this is a difficult thing because the neighborhood wants to maintain a good relationship with the church, and I think the church wants to maintain a good relationship with the neighborhood, but this project has strained that relationship to some extent. I felt like the letter that they sent out was not very detailed, didn't offer really any information about the project other than to say they wanted to put up some wayfinding signs to help their visitors and their members locate things around their campus. But it didn't say where the signs were, how big they were, what they were, or anything really. You'd have to read the packet that you all got or something to really understand what they were doing. I do think the neighborhood wants to talk more about it or wants to talk about it. I don't think really there's been any discussion with the neighborhood about the project.
Does the neighborhood have some consensus on what they want to do, or do they just want to talk?
No, I think they have some thoughts about it.
Okay.
It's a hard situation because there's a lot of people that live in the neighborhood that are members of St. Luke's, but most of those people didn't know anything about this project. So they're very sympathetic to our neighbors who live around the church. They're very sympathetic to the visual impact that this is going to have when you drive through the neighborhood. Phil and I have talked several times about the size and the number of the signs. I think no one is wanting to negatively impact the church, but I think a lot of people don't really understand the need for this project in great detail. I live next to Oklahoma Heritage, and they have a decent-sized parking lot that is my neighbor, and their parking lot signs are 18 inches tall. You know, I don't know that, I think, as Dina said and Brian said, you know, it's the size and location of a lot of these signs that's causing a lot of discontent, and a lot of the neighbors don't understand the need for them. I don't know that they're going to change their mind, but I do think they'd like an opportunity to hear the church explain what they see their need as and try to come to some understanding and possible some compromise on some of this, and we've never had that opportunity.
Okay. And I said this before, we have in the past accommodated churches with this type of thing for traffic and safety issues. And so we want everybody to get along, we want everybody to be friends, and we want to do what's best for the community. But I do know that we have done this in the past.
I think this would be over-compensating or over-accommodation for, I mean, you can't go 5 feet around there and not see a sign that says St. Luke's on it.
Sure.
So I don't know adding 15 more is going to make anybody know where anything is any better than they already do.
When HPC had its hearing, did the association make some counter-proposal or some other suggestion?
No, their proposal was that they wanted to have a meeting with the church to talk about it and see if there was some common ground or some compromise that could be reached. Okay. And as far as I know, the church has known about the letters from the McKennas and the Dolans and the Doolans and other people for months, and they've never reached out to talk to them, and these are adjacent neighbors of theirs.
Okay. Does any of the board have any questions?
Not of this speaker, but I do of the applicant.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to provide to the board at this time? We're not trying to run you off, is all we're saying.
No, I just think if you take a drive around the church, you'll see that there's, in my mind, an excessive amount of signage now, and this just adds to it. Now, we do understand that they want to mark some of their buildings for their visitors so people know where to go, but are they giving up signs to do that? You know, I mean, I read the packet, and it seems like they're in great excess of anything that would seem reasonable, along with the locations in the right-of-way. So I would like you all to take that into consideration.
Okay, we appreciate you coming today. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? We're not trying to cut anybody off, or if somebody's thought of something else they want to say, feel free to come back up to the podium. If not, would you like to respond at this time, sir?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I think that I would like to represent that this is a unique and extraordinary circumstance. The zoning, as you can see from the diagram in front of you, the zoning in this area is let's say, there's a multiplicity of zonings in this area. I think everybody would agree that it is a transitional area. Everything to the south of the church is commercial. To the north and to the west is HP, and then there's a variety of zonings to the east. Which kind of complicates really the signage ordinance and interpretation of the signage ordinance. There are a very large number of buildings involved here. This is a campus that covers 8 acres on 6 different blocks. And there are 4 major components. Let me break down the signage for you. There are 8, what I would call relatively small signs that identify the parking lots and the driveways to the parking lots. 4 of those are in the HP district. There are 4 signs that identify major components of the church, and that would be the Christian Life Center, the mansion, which houses the offices, the Children's Center, and the offices and education. There are 2 proposed signs that replace signs that have already been removed. These were signs that weren't of the quality and character that the church wanted to keep. And so they are replacement signs, for signs that have been removed. One is smaller and the other is larger. Another extraordinary circumstance and unique circumstance is the right-of-way. If you'll go back to the site plan, you'll see that there's a 100-foot right-of-way on 15th and a 100-foot right-of-way on 14th. That is extraordinary in a residential area. And the reason that some of these signs are placed in the right-of-way is just because the right-of-way is so wide. There was a comment made in the report that I think we do have actually, there are very detailed drawings that we've submitted for this signage packet, including visualizations that show the actual size of the signs and the actual relationships of the signs to the driveways and the signs to the churches, the church and the church buildings. There are some of these signs that are in the site triangle. We were actually unaware of that until staff report came out. So they are in the driveway site triangle, not the intersection road intersection site triangles. So we will take those out of the site triangles. We don't want to leave them in the site triangle. Sure. But we will relocate those. We have been through the HPC process. We've appeared twice before HPC. We have listened to HPC. We have agreed to abide by their recommendations for changes to the signs, both in size and in placement. And as far as the conversation with the neighborhood, I believe the church has reached out to the neighborhood, and Reverend Greenwald can speak to that. But that would conclude my remarks in the presentation of the suite of signage.
I think there's going to be some questions, so you don't get off the hook that easy.
I don't get to walk away.
Jeff, do you have some questions?
I was going to tell you that aside from the objections and concerns of the neighborhood, the number of signs and the scale of the signs were a concern for me. And hearing the objections of, neighbors and homeowners association, we have a new letter from the pastor of First Baptist. I'm not sure that you've seen. Apparently, they had requested some additional signage in 2005, and it was not allowed. And so, they, along with other congregations and downtown churches, I'm sure, are watching this case closely for, the setting of a precedent. And the one thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to undermine any of the activities, in this fine church, and we want people to reasonably be able to find their way to the parking and to the different, entrances and programs that are inside the church. But it appears to me that the proposal as it stands now is, perhaps not, what I could support. But I'm not saying, that no additional signage. I think, what's probably in order is to fall back some. I think, the church has been caught off guard a little bit by the reaction and the fact that people in the neighborhood wanted to react to this. And, they may have had the opportunity and didn't for whatever reason. But I think there's the opportunity now for, the church and for you all as the design team, the architects, to have that conversation and to seek some middle ground where there's appropriate signage for the church, but it's in line with what the neighborhood feels more comfortable with. In some cases, I think Mr. Dolan lives, directly across on 15th from the church, and so that's a rather large, sign to place. Every morning when he comes out for the paper, that's what he'll see. So I would be unable to support the variance request as it stands, but what I do think is there's the opportunity for a conversation. I think the neighborhood wants a good relationship with the church and has had one over the years. I think the church wants it with the neighborhood, and so I think there's the opportunity for some additional discussion.
Thank you for that. Just one point of information. Mr. Dolan objected to the sign across the street from him. The church just removed a much larger sign at that same location.
And it may not only be the size, it may be, the materials, and so forth and so on that are part of the concerns. I won't speak for them, but what I do think I hear is a desire to have some additional conversation with the church and its representatives about this.
We have not heard from HPC. Mr. Tagg, do you have any comments?
I guess in a word, no, I can't remember that case.
Okay.
And I didn't come prepared to talk about it, but my memory is that we only were able to review a finite number of signs because that's where the signs that were in the HP area, we didn't review those that were outside the area, as I recall. But
okay. All right. Well, thank you. Reverend Greenwald, would you like to speak as to your meetings and dealings with the neighborhood?
Thank you. I'm Phil Greenwald, Chief Financial Officer for St. Luke's United Methodist Church. I reside in Edmond. We are very grateful for the opportunity to present to you today. We've worked closely with the city staff and the Historic Preservation Commission to present a plan that we believe has been modified to meet the concerns that have been expressed. We have a long-standing partnership with the neighbors and have many dozens of families who live in the neighborhood and who are very much aware and supportive of this project. We have initiated conversation on multiple occasions and had those conversations, and we feel there is strong support. We're sad, as we've indicated in our letter, that there are a very small number of residents who have indicated opposition. We certainly understand that we cannot always have complete consensus, but we are very hopeful that you'll approve us to move forward with this project.
There is someone else that submitted a protest. Is it Catherine Dooley? Did I say that correctly? Would you like to speak at this time?
Yes. I apologize. My name is Catherine Dooley. I live at 419 Northwest 14th, which is a block and a half from St. Luke's. And I'm here to protest. My husband and I have written a letter, which I believe you all have a copy of. And I'd first like to take issue with what you just said about that neighbors who are members of the church and attend are in agreement with this new signage, because I've spoken to 2 members who attend St. Luke's very regularly who had no idea that these signs were going up. They had heard there were some signs When I told them what the signs were going to look like, the scope of the signs, where they were going to be placed, they were not happy. And I find the signs to be way too big. I don't like the idea of having what to me look like tombstones on the street at every entrance to every parking lot. I think it is not conducive, does not fit in with a residential neighborhood. So, no. And Mr. Dolan had just mentioned to me that the sign which had been removed, which was just mentioned, was never properly permitted in the first place. So I also happen to attend a Midtown church. I walk to church regularly. There is obviously a tremendous amount of traffic on Sunday morning, and I have huge concerns for safety. Even if they move the signs back some, the scope and size of these signs, I think, is going to restrict not only the view of the drivers, but the view of people. And I know that we have children in the neighborhood who regularly ride their bicycles to activities at St. Luke's, and I'm concerned for their safety. So I protest greatly. For me, if St. Luke's feels the necessity to put up signs at the entrance to the parking lot, a small sign, say on the scope and size of political signs that go in someone's front yard, which are set there, which can say parking for St. Luke's, I think would be adequate. We are in the 21st century. When people are looking for a location today, they get out the navigation on their phone and they find it. If they get within sight or within a few blocks of the church, they look up and they're going to see the bell tower. I do not think these signs are necessary for people to find the church. And I also am not pleased with referring to it as a campus. They have parking lots, they have the facility across the street on Robinson. This to me is not a campus. A campus is a university or a big school that has walls and fences up. This is not a campus. It's a church in a residential neighborhood. We love having St. Luke's there, but I really think these signs would be ugly.
And just for purpose of the record, you're on 14th Street, correct?
Yes, I am.
And you're here in your individual capacity, not on behalf of a board or an association?
No, I'm here as a resident of 14th Street.
Right. Just want to make sure the record's clear. We appreciate you coming in. Is there anything else you'd like to present to the board at this time?
I don't think so. I think everything else was in our letter.
Okay.
So, thank you.
One of the things that comes to mind in a situation like this is trying to come up with some type of compromise that makes everybody happy. And I know that you've gone in front of the HPC. I know you've had the approval of the HPC. If you would like to have, I've had people in the past say, we'd like to maybe continue this to the next meeting of the Board of Adjustment so we can talk to our neighbors. If that's something you'd wish to do, that's great. If it's not something you wish to do, I understand that fully. And I'm just throwing that out there in case, I know you guys don't come before the board every meeting and probably not familiar with our procedures, but we have done that in the past where a continuance is granted till the next board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your asking the question. We feel that, as indicated in our letter, we spent more than 18 months working on this project. We've had multiple conversations with the community as well as our membership, the city staff, and the boards, and so we'd ask for a vote today.
Okay.
Thank you.
One thing, I'm going to have to agree with Mr. Austin. I think there's way too many signs. I think there can be some compromise yet, and I know 18 months is a long period of time, but in this configuration, I don't think I could vote for it favorably today.
Mike, any comments?
I don't think it would hurt anybody if we moved it to the next January. We don't meet again.
What's our next docket, January 3rd?
We don't meet.
January 3rd.
Yeah, that's a month.
But it's only if the parties if the applicant, wishes a continuance and wishes and is motivated or has any interest in having a conversation. It doesn't sound like you do.
I guess my response to your request, which I appreciate, is that we have initiated on multiple occasions the opportunity to dialogue with our neighbors and the community. And as I've indicated in the letter, there's been no feedback which has provided, in our opinion, productive suggestions or modifications as to what might be acceptable. We have worked closely with the city staff to try and determine what that might be. They have made their recommendations, and we appreciate the fact that they've recommended this for approval. So I guess we need a little more direction.
I would suggest to you is that we're missing one board member, and so we just have 4 of us.
Correct.
And you may want to continue this to the 3rd, and hopefully the residents can submit some ideas to you, and then we could come back and take up a vote then.
Okay. I think that's okay. I think that's okay. Obviously, we're kind of...
Just one second.
Yes, you bet.
Yeah, Rita has a good point, and I know you're standing over here, and would you like to say something, ma'am?
I don't like to say that I don't think someone's being truthful, but the church has not ever really wanted to have a dialogue about this with the neighborhood. We've asked and asked, and the letter didn't ask if we wanted to talk. We do want to talk. We want to be good neighbors with St. Luke's. We're still willing to talk about this whenever they want to talk about it, and I think what you've seen today has been indicative of how they've acted about just wanting to get the votes and move on along with the project that they might have worked on for 18 months, but the neighborhood has not known about for very long. And so I'm sorry if I sound agitated. I am agitated, but we do want to try to work through this situation with them, but I did want to tell you what I think is a factual representation of what has happened.
Would you be comfortable with coming back on January 3rd?
Yes.
You sit down and meet with the church and talk to them? And,
Yes.
And do you have some specific proposals that you want to present
We
to
can
them?
come up with some.
Okay.
We appointed a committee at the last board meeting.
Can you have that ready in the next week or so, since we're meeting January 3rd?
We can.
All right. I'm open to suggestion, but I would entertain a motion to continue this to January 3rd if that's what the applicant wants. And I would say this, Rita had a good point, and that is that there were some changes that HPC recommended.
Yes.
If those drawings could reflect that so they could see those,
Sure.
maybe we could come to some resolution at our next meeting.
Let me just make a comment in that regard. Mr. Rawls, who represents the Historic Preservation Commission, requested those modifications and received them, and so those have been made available.
Okay,
And
great.
we'd certainly
great. And maybe
like
Mr.
to
Rawls
provide
can be here next time. That would be helpful, too. All right? Would someone care to make a motion to continue this to the next docket?
Is that acceptable, Anthony?
That's acceptable. Sure.
Okay. Make a motion to continue this until the next meeting, which is
January 3rd.
February the 3rd.
January 3rd.
January the 3rd, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right, would you
That's
please
all right.
cast your vote at this time? We will see you all January 3rd. Thanks for coming today, everybody. Would someone tell Mr. Harris he can come back in the room? Yeah, see if he's awake.
Item number 16, case number 13602, appeal of Robert L. Sullivan Properties of the decision of the Historic Preservation Commission regarding the denial of a certificate of appropriateness for the installation of parking located at 1012, 1014 Northwest 42nd Street.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, Dennis Box, 522 Colcord Drive. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm here with Mr. Sullivan, and Mr. Sullivan is going to tell you a little bit about the property that you all are looking at today. This is part of property that he purchased in 1975. And for those of you all that are familiar with VZDs and the retail center just to the north of that, and also there's now a dental office which borders the duplex in question. That was all purchased in 1975 by Mr. Sullivan. This has been a process, and Mr. Sullivan will tell you about what's going on and how he ended up in this situation, but he inadvertently, not having to get a curb cut permit, thought he could put a drive in, and he couldn't, and so we've gone 3 times before the Historical Preservation Board, and we are now here before you all. We think they didn't look at the facts as the facts exist, and as part of your packet, I have a small version of this exhibit. Now, what this exhibit does is it shows you...
Before we go into that, one thing I was going to point out to everybody on the board, this is an appeal pursuant to Section 594250K, and so it's a trial de novo, and I wanted to make everybody aware of the fact that we're trying this under a different standard than we typically do some of the other matters we heard today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think that is important because typically you all look at cases, whether it's a variance where you've got 4 statutory conditions to meet, or whether it's a special exception that has unique conditions. In this case, you're to put yourselves in the same position that the HP Commission was, and I think the facts will bear out that if you do that, and those of you all that have seen the property, and I hope all of you have seen the property, because we have some very unique facts that are accompany this site. We think that what we're asking for is reasonable, meets the guidelines, and when you talk about the guidelines, when you look at I on the regulations, Mr. Chairman, that you were discussing, it talks about unique circumstances. And under unique circumstances, the code actually says the following. It is acknowledged that some applications to the HP Commission will require approval of work that does not strictly comply with the standards set forth in the preservation guidelines, or which is not addressed by the guidelines, but which is nevertheless historically appropriate and in compliance with the intent of the guidelines and the Secretary of Interior standards. In such circumstances, the HP Commission may approve a certificate of appropriateness for such work upon issuing a detailed finding the proposed work is historically appropriate and consistent with the spirit and intent of the guidelines. Now, I think it's important when we analyze this case to keep in mind that if you look at what is unique about this property, number one, as indicated, Mr. Sullivan has owned it since 1975. And Mr. Sullivan has done a number of improvements to the building, the structure, including new wooden windows. He owned it prior to this becoming a historical district. But if you all have seen the duplex, it's very nice. It is kept up, and he really has a very difficult situation to deal with. Difficult in the sense that those of us that have driven along Western over the last year have noticed that there have been significant changes. Significant changes that have brought more restaurants, more bars, more traffic. And in fact, I would tell you that if you drive on a weekend or a Monday night, a Wednesday night, a Friday night, a Thursday, and you drive down 42nd Street, you're going to see that the south side of 42nd Street is full of cars most of the time. So the options that Mr. Sullivan has in regard to his tenants is limited. Now, it's also important that when you look at the property directly north of our property, is Cafe Nova, and directly north of the property is a parking lot. So as you drive out there, the question is, does the drive, the parking area that Ms. Sullivan put in, have any negative impact not only on this block, but the district? If you've driven it several times, I submit to you, there's no negative impact. In fact, directly to the east of the parking area, there's a huge hedge. It's been there for a long time. It will continue to be there, and it kind of acts as a buffer, as a little block area. So, unique, yes. This is a property that the little alleyway that's between the dental office and the duplex is approximately 9 feet wide. Very narrow. I have couple of letters. One of the things that we pointed out to the HP Commission, and I've given a copy of this to Mr. Tate. One of the things we pointed out to the HP Commission was the fact that safety was a real problem. Now, in response to that, the HP Commission merely said, well, in this day and time, there are things that can be done, such as lighting, security, and gates. Ms. Sullivan will tell you that none of those would work at this site. The tenant letters that you're looking at now reflect the fact that the tenants are not comfortable in parking behind that area, and for good reason. You have individuals on a regular basis that will siphon gas, will walk back there, will do things that are totally inappropriate. But in addition, as you can see, we've got some areas for commercial pickup in regard to grease pits, et cetera. So you've got some commercial vehicles that go back there. The picture you're looking at, the bars on that building were incorporated in the building in about 1935. So, security even back then was an issue. But security is uppermost on Mr. Sullivan's mind, and I think we have to be mindful that, if you look at this piece of property, knowing that there are several factors that make it unique. Number one, right across the street is a parking lot, commercial. To the west is commercial. That the HP Commission, when this area was formed, for whatever reason, kind of had a notch out of this duplex lot, and it starts from the alley, but it goes 10 feet in and 35 feet down. So the entire duplex lot is not even zoned HP. When we submitted pictures to the HP Commission and to Mr. Chambliss that you all have a copy of, we showed a number of properties that had situations which, under the current code standards, would not be approved administratively. And even on this big map, you can see we've got a front drive here, we've got one here, and then the pictures show a number of examples, and Ms. Sullivan can explain those to you if you have any questions. But when we applied for and asked for the CA, my good friend Mr. Tague, who is here, and I have the utmost respect for, he's a very good lawyer, and he's a friend of mine. He came very well prepared and had 15 points that were written out, and those are the 15 points you see within your staff report. And I hope you all have had an opportunity to read our response, because from my standpoint, there was a real theme that went on. Keeping in mind, at the HP Commission, we were continued on 3 occasions. But the theme that really prevailed at the HP Commission was that this area and the actions that we had done, just trying to provide for a parking area for the tenants, was going to have a huge impact on the integrity and overall character of the historic district. And that's a theme that I've seen over and over. In fact, in March, when I appeared before this board dealing with a case that had to do with the tiles on 14th Street, that same language was part of their order. Now the question is, if you all have driven by and you all have looked at it, I don't know how you could say that this area for parking for the duplex really has a negative impact on the historical preservation area or the property right around here. We don't think it has any impact at all. With regard to their second theme, the HP Commission indicated that the proposed parking area would have an adverse effect on the visual and historic character not only of this property, but the district. Now, I don't think that's factually accurate. We came off an alley. We didn't ask for an additional curb cut. We put little bushes up in front of the parking area. To our north is an entire parking lot, and to the west is parking. So this is an area where we tried to be sensitive. In fact, even the staff with the HP Commission recognized that Mr. Sullivan tried to provide the correct color in the concrete, which is one of the requirements that goes along with a driveway. So we're here. We believe, if you will read our answers to the points that the HP Commission listed, number one, we don't think this is going to have any negative impact on the historical preservation area. What we're going to do is provide safety, and we're going to be able to continue to lease a duplex that is very difficult to lease. It's very difficult when you have cars that park in front of your duplex until 2 o'clock at night, 5 nights a week. And so we offered to the Commission that if there were some things that would provide an additional bit of safety, landscaping, whatever was needed, we were more than willing to do it. But from day one, there was no compromise, and here we are, and we would ask that you all listen to our plea. Ms. Sullivan will tell you he is apologetic for having put in the parking area without a CA. It happened, and he did it. But he has been a good steward of that property since 1975, and I submit to you that, without some relief, we're in a situation where you're going to have a piece of property that's going to be not only difficult, but maybe impossible to have tenants that will reside within this duplex. And one of the comments that was made within the order coming out of the HP Commission was the fact that, well, maybe we could put no parking signs up. Well, whether you put a no parking sign up or you have cars parked in front, either way, you don't have parking. So that doesn't do much to help us at all. Now, having said this, I'd like for Mr. Sullivan to come and then both of us are ready to answer questions. I know Mr. Tague is here, and we are very comfortable if this commission wants us to look at some modifications that you all think would be in keeping with the area. But if you've driven it, looked at it, I mean, we are a residential property in a sea of parking. So,
Dennis, before you leave, in the back, you said it was not feasible to do security, or go over that again.
If I could, I'm going to have Mr. Sullivan go over that because he can tell you exactly what's taken place. They have cameras that 24/7 watch back there, and so the things that occur just don't allow for somebody to drive through that narrow area, go back there and feel comfortable getting out of their vehicle. But Bob's owned it since 75, so I'm going to let him.
So fencing or anything like that's not going to help, and a gated entry wouldn't help?
No. And you've got the added problem, you've got commercial vehicles coming back and taking, like the grease trap area and taking, they've got to come back there on a daily basis. So, you've got a conflict there. But I'm going to let Bob answer that one.
Hi, I'm Robert Sullivan. I own the property at 4200 Northwestern, 1012, 1014 Northwest 42nd, and 1016 Northwest 42nd. I bought the property in December 2nd of 1975, so just last Sunday, it was the 37th year that I've owned this property. And I've owned it for 37 years and have been involved in Crown Heights in that regard. Since then, I have 4 tenants. Dental clinic that's been there since 1988. The restaurant has been there since 1976. The beauty salon has been there since 1976. And the candy store my wife started back in 1979 and is still open today. So she sold it in 1990, but it is now under somebody else, but still in operation. This is sort of my history with that property. And then in 1990, I bought the Will Rogers Theater, and I remodeled it and into a banquet facility. And about 93, we had a La Baguette took over the banquet facility and put a restaurant in, and they in turn sold it to Sushi Nico in like 1998, I believe, or 2000, and they've been I sold the property to them in like 2002, and they operate it now. And then in 2005 or 4, I remodeled the property here at 518 Colcord, just right next to Dennis's building. It was well, actually, the city, it was owned by Charlie Shadid, and he had a porno theater that they closed down in like late 90s, and he didn't know what to do with it, and I bought it from him in 2002 and ended up remodeling it into residential lofts and office space, and it's presently occupied by one person that leases the whole building and lives on the second level and has offices on the first level. So that's sort of my history of commercial real estate. And all these buildings are sort of historic buildings. This building on Colcord was probably built in 1910. I think the property at 4200 Western was built in 1935 or something like that, and the Will Rogers Theater was built in 1948. So that's... Yes. Your question was in regards to the...
About the security of
the area is fenced all the way around, and so there's only one way in and out of the back area, and that's through the common alleyway or driveway that the restaurant, the beauty shop, and the candy store have. They each have a entrance in the back, and then the dental clinic also has an entrance in the back. So that's the only way in and out, and it's just always been a problem with just petty crime going on at different times in the area. The restaurant has surveillance cameras, and they generally will see people going in, siphoning gas, things of that nature. Has been sort of the latest deal, but there's always somebody wandering back in there. And it's because it's all fenced and you have the high walls. It's just not a very safe environment. We have one security light that is an OG&E security light on one of their light poles.
Did you indicate a while ago that the property only had one residence in it now?
The duplex is
it occupied now?
I didn't. There's 2 units, and each unit is occupied.
Okay. Over the past 6 to 10 years, what has the vacancy rate been? Has it been occupied pretty much over those years?
Yes, it has. It's and that's one point. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's. In all the years that I've owned this, we've always, anybody that rents it, we've told them, well, there's 2 spaces in the back that you can use, or you can park it in the dental clinic parking lot, but you have to be out by like 7:30 or 8 in the morning because the dental clinic opens up then, or you can park on the street, or you can park in the west parking lot or the north parking lot of the VZD restaurant building, okay? And the choice is, nobody's ever parked in back. They just, it's just too scary. The tenants that are there now, I think if you read both letters, they'll point out to you the same, that they're just not comfortable parking back there. The other things that go on is that you have 4 trash dumpsters that also are in the back of this in this parking area in the back.
So parking hasn't been a significant factor
Not
as far as keeping it occupied?
Not at night. It has changed in the last in the last 3 or 4 years, and this is sort of like, well, why am I here, and why did I do what I did? And I was repairing about 30 feet of length in the drive between the dental clinic and the duplex, and I had concrete guys there, and we tore out all this stuff because I had to sort of hump, and it was holding water, so I tore it out and repaired it, and I said, well, God, the parking is really becoming very strenuous in front with the Cafe Nova going in, and just they have nights where they give free beer away, and I mean it just slams the whole 42nd Street. And my tenants were just having a hard time finding a place to park. And my feeling is that safety sort of is the main thing, and so I said, well, I'll just put in a parking area in front that will give them off-street, safe, secure parking. And so that's how I ended up doing it and being here. It's just, I guess a little bit out of frustration, because once Nova went in, you used to be able to park all the way up to 42nd Street. Well, then they put no parking signs up on both sides, and so the first place you could park would be in front of my duplex. And so that's where the car started, is in front of my duplex, and went all the way east down to sometimes, just depending on the crowds, whatever the next street is, that Francis or Ollie, I'm not sure which one it is, but it's, a half block down. And so my tenants would, they would come home at night if they'd been out somewhere else, if it was a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. They couldn't park in the dental clinic because they were full of people just parking, using those spaces. And so they'd end up parking 3, 4, 5 houses down. I mean, so those are some of the problems that were coming up, and so that's how we got there. Any other questions?
I do. One of the things I enjoy about this board appointment is it allows me to learn a lot about the community that I live in. And since I knew that we were going to hear your case, I know a lot about your property now and the neighborhood in Crown Heights. And I've been around your duplex during the day and at night, and I've been around the Will Rogers Center during the day and during the night, and I've talked to the people that patrol that area for security. Talked to some of the people that come out back to have a cigarette that are in the commercial center, and so it's been a pleasure to to know more about that area and some of the history there. And I want to compliment you too and your wife for your vision and your commitment to buying in areas that were dormant and I think, the entire community is proud of what's happened along Western and in other parts of the city.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Where people with vision and the resources have, taken the chance and done that. A few observations and then some findings, if you don't mind. The duplex, the building occupied by Crown Heights Dentist, and the building that houses VZDs were constructed in 1934.
I'm guessing, I know it was in the 30s, I think, but I wasn't sure.
The assessor's records indicate 1934. Okay. And the building where VZD's was first occupied in 1934 by Crown Drug, and succeeded by VZ Drug, and then Hambrick's, who was there at the time you purchased the property, and then VZD's opened in 1976. I couldn't have told you what year, but I know I was a young man when I used to frequent that place. The point is the nature of each of the businesses that's been in that commercial center all would have involved some delivery of goods and have some services behind the building. So when we think of coexisting between the duplex and that commercial center where VZD's is and the candy store, from the beginning, regardless of what business was there has been some activity behind those buildings and some need for access, some need for services such as trash. The driveway that provides access between the duplex and the building is 10 feet wide, and it's been speculated about, and I've confirmed it because I measured it. The common area at the end of the driveway accommodates your trash dumpsters and, as you said, some other things, and provides parking access. The concrete pad that appears to have been the floor for the garage is 19 feet wide. And I measured my driveway at my house, and my driveway is 17'6". And so the characterization that it's not large enough to park two cars side by side, I don't believe is accurate. I believe that 19 feet is wide enough.
Oh, it is. It's wide enough to park two cars. It's just not a very safe area.
One day when I was there was the Mercedes SL500, which I believe belongs to the dentist, was parked behind the duplex, and there was a Jeep Wagoneer and a Lexus IS350 there. Today, on the way to the meeting, I stopped by, and there are 7 vehicles back there. 7.
Daytime, it works for daytime parking. That's not an issue. It's just nobody wants to park back there at night. I have 3 girls, and I would never ask any of my daughters to park back there, or any of my tenants.
And right now, I wouldn't either. And I'm with you. I've got daughters, and I would have some concerns. The wood fence that surrounds the back of the duplex has a gate.
It does, but it's locked from the inside, and you can't access it from the parking lot side. I mean, that could be changed, but that's not going to change the
By itself,
area.
I would agree.
Yeah.
The other thing that I noticed when I went back there at night, because I wanted to see what the lighting was like. And as you look down that driveway from 42nd Street, the OG&E, lamp that you alluded to is there. Does it, is it a real bright light? No, but it does provide some illumination back there. The thing that I noticed too is there are porch lights on the back of the duplex, but they appear that if those were upgraded some, that you might be able to light the back of the duplex more adequately.
You could, yeah. I mean, that's it won't change the problem that people are just for 20 years. I've told tenants they could park. They have never gone back there and parked.
And I believe what you want to do, and I believe what's proper, is for your tenants to have choices.
Yeah.
And you've given them that.
Thank you.
I think if that area is properly maintained and the fence gate is accessible, and you may want to reconfigure it somehow so that it's more accessible so that you can park and go straight into the back of your unit. If I had to park and ask my daughter to walk down that driveway to the front, I would have a concern just like you do. But if they could park and it was reasonably lit and there was a secure gate that they could pass through and the back of the duplex was properly lighted, I believe, that would assure me enough. You're closer to the house. I mean, with the parking in the front now, they're close to the house. But they can be close to the house, and I believe, in safe proximity and under safe circumstances in the back. The increased traffic on 42nd in the adjacent areas as the result of the success, which we all applaud, of VZD's, Cafe Nova, and Will Rogers Center and other businesses, has led to an increase in street parking. In my visits during the weekend, particularly on Friday and Saturday, Dennis is not properly characterizing the parking. 42nd Street is parked solid all the way down to St. Francis on both sides of the street.
Mm-hmm.
I observed the fenced parking behind Will Rogers Center. In your wife's testimony, she says there are 200 spaces there. Of all the times that I've been by there, I never saw it anywhere close to capacity. Now that looks to me like a safe lot. It's properly fenced, it's properly lighted, and I actually was by at 1 o'clock this Sunday morning because we've been babysitting, and I saw you all pull a chain and a thing so that you can't freely access. I mean, it's either you or the people who occupy those buildings that go to lengths to make sure that people have access to parking and that you have control of what goes on there.
Owning and being in the neighborhood for as long as I've been there, the thing that I've noticed is that when I had the Will Rogers Theater, is that the last place people would park would be in the back parking lot of the Will Rogers Theater and walk to the front. They would park down at the VZD building where they could be on the street and walk to the front of the Will Rogers Theater as opposed to parking in the back of the Will Rogers. I mean, it's just, it's human nature. I don't know if it's just something I've
And the employee of the security company concurs with that. He says, there's parking, safe parking available just right there, and they prefer to park on the street.
Exactly.
And you're right. Why they prefer to do it, I don't know. But
I don't either.
But I think it's unfair to you and your tenants, and I think it's also unfair to the other residents along 42nd Street, all the way down to St. Francis. As I said, I think the area behind the duplex can be made safer than it is today without an undue burden on you.
Well, there's just a lot of, besides the safety, but which is the main thing, is just having a secure, safe parking place that's off-street. But you have commercial deliveries and commercial activity going on, whether it be the removal of trash or the delivery of anything from bread to whatever to the restaurant or the candy. Well, the candy store doesn't get deliveries in the back, but so the ingress egress is also an issue.
And that's true, but VZD's has been there since 1976, and the candy store's been there.
Since
and the hair
76.
salon's been there.
Right.
And so, you know, for 35 years, people were making it work.
Well, but they've never parked, the people that have, that live in the duplex have never parked in back, ever, to any extent.
Where did they park?
They park either in the dental clinic parking lot or on the street, or sometimes they would park in the north parking lot of the VZD building.
So if the street parking issue were resolved, then no problems.
Say it again? Well, the problem is that as the area is developed, my tenants can no longer have the dental clinic parking at night because anybody can park there after 5 o'clock. So if they come home on a Thursday or Friday night and there's parking all the way down to Francis, they're going to, obviously, the parking spaces in front of the dental clinic are going to be taken as well. There's no way to monitor keeping people out of those spaces for my tenants because it's just whatever you put up, it's not going to.
And I understand that, but I think that your tenants and the other people on 42nd deserve the right to park or to have company over. Right now, if any of those families entertain and have company over, I mean, they've got a problem similar to yours.
Right.
I think all of you are entitled to that, and you're right. The left on their own, these young people that visit these establishments are going to park on the street for whatever reason. But I do think, you know, that we enjoy, you know, the opportunity for the establishments to reorient and encourage their customers to take advantage of the parking where they should be parking, which is behind the Will Rogers Center. And you can also apply, you know, to the Traffic Commission for, and I know this came up at HP, is to have some signage that restricts it to resident parking only or something like that. And you don't want a scenario where neighbors are turning in neighbors because they see a car and they don't know who it belongs to. Most people, if there's a sign that says don't park here, won't. Not everybody. And I know your wife, you know, brought up the issue of how do you enforce it. You enforce it now, relatively successfully, you know, on 42nd Street on the north side of VZD's, that center, Cafe Nova. So I don't think it's a promise of a perfect life, but I think, you know, your tenants and the other residents on 42nd absolutely deserve reasonable access to the street parking in front of their homes. And I do believe that reasonably you can improve the parking area and provide that as an option for your tenants. You're not going to make them do it, but if they felt safe and if there was reasonable access to their home, you know, you may do it.
I might say one thing, and I'll let your legal counsel respond. That alternative of providing for residential parking only on a street is not an option. Legally, that street is owned by the City of Oklahoma City. You can restrict it and not allow anybody to park there, but you can't provide that only the homeowner at this location, or in this case, the people that reside in the duplex, could park in front of the duplex. That's not an option.
But you do retain the option of having the establishments whose customers are parking that street solid, of you know, adding some additional signage or doing something that encourages their clients to park where they should be instead of in front of people's houses.
Yeah, and good luck on that work. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's, you know, promising a perfect world, but it's a start and it's an option. But on the street where you live, you know, I don't want somebody in front of my house on the street, you know, every Friday and Saturday night, you know, till 2 in the morning.
But he's correct about that. We could put a sign up that says no parking, or we could say no parking certain hours, but we couldn't say residents
You couldn't
only.
define by who was allowed and who wasn't.
Right, because we wouldn't be able to enforce it.
But I guess the point is that, you know, there are some options to consider in terms of trying to make sure that the people, the tenants and the people who own homes there have, you know, the right to reasonable access to the front of their house and the parking in front of their house.
Well, I think what you point out best is that the complexion of the neighborhood has changed dramatically
For the better.
since the 70s.
I mean, it's absolutely, it's dynamic and energetic, it's great. I mean, a lot of young people in my family, you know, pour dollars into that part of town. They love it over there.
You know, one of the options when Bob came to me and talked about the mistake he'd made was, well, what could we do? And we looked at what was to the north, which is commercial, and we talked about, well, I guess we could rezone it commercial and go out of the HP area. And Bob checked around with many of his friends and people that live in the area, and they didn't want him to go out of the HP area. So this was the option that we tried to choose, which was an option that we thought, well, we can come up with some landscaping and some different things, knowing that we didn't ask for a curb cut. We're coming off our own alley. And as you articulated very well, I mean, it is a big problem on 42nd Street. And, you know, if you have a tenant and they come home at 8 o'clock, yeah, it's an option. They can call a wrecker service, but after 2 or 3 times that, they're looking for another place. So, you know, that...
I spent a lot of time looking at this last night and could have used some coffee probably with it. It's pretty thick. But when I look at the photographs that were submitted, for example, 601 Northwest 41st, it seems like almost the same thing was done there. So can you tell me what's the precedent? What has happened over time? Was it allowed in the past to be done in the neighborhood?
That's a very good question, and one of the things that we tried to present to the board was that we're not calling these permitted by the HP or non-conforming. All we're trying to do is show that what we're doing is not going to have this catastrophic effect that their conclusion reached, that this was going to, you know, on the edge of the HP area, you know, set it into motion to where it would cause these major problems. We have not found whether they were non-conforming or got permits. All we know is if you drive through the neighborhood, both on this street and all around, and the new pictures that Bob submitted to you, you're going to find very similar situations all throughout the neighborhood.
So Dennis, you're saying that there are these other examples in the neighborhood, they may not be permitted, they not be used, but you guys are coming in good faith because the option of behind in the alleyway is not as safe an alternative as its option of the driveway, and then second, that if you were to restrict something on the street, it not only hurts the people going to the establishments around it, it also hurts your tenant, correct?
Yes, sir. And we're coming in good faith saying, you know, we made a mistake by not asking for the CA first, but having said that, if we need to put double row of hedges or whatever you all would want to you know, make it look nicer, we'll do it. But as you drive there, when you look to your left and you have a full parking lot, and we just have a little drive that comes in off the alley. So we're at your mercy, but we're...
I would point out to the other board members, too, that in some cases, you know, additional parking in the front of the house was permitted before the ordinance was adopted. And so the examples that have been cited, you know, none of us knows whether, you know, that construction took place before or after. Sure. And, you know, additionally, all of us as citizens, if we feel like somebody has done something that's in violation of HP, we all have the ability to pursue, you know, have recourse on that and ask that it be checked out. The other thing, too, is is don't see that as precedent for the request today. It is, you know, I mean, Dennis, you know, testified in July that, you know, the intention was not to create a precedent with this request that he's got. And I think, you know, the value of historic preservation, and again, when we want to do something and it's like, you know, this is the United States and I have the right and I can do it and things like that. Historic preservation, even though, you know, it rubs you the wrong way from time to time because it prohibits you or restricts you in some way from doing something you feel like you ought to have the right to do, is protection. And in the same way that, you know, you're before us today because of historic preservation guidelines, as a owner in that area, you enjoy protections because of historic preservation and the guidelines. And so, and when we heard the deal about the signs and HP considered that, you know, they looked at that from their perspective. They're the ones that have examined this. You know, they met 3 times, have thoroughly vetted this issue, have recommended against, you know, the CA. And, you know, I'm going to concur with their decision, not because I don't understand what you did or the motivation. I mean, I've got 3 daughters too, and their safety and their well-being, and all those things are paramount to me. But when I look at, those buildings, the footprint of those buildings, it's been there since 1934. BZD's has been there since 1976. All the businesses that have been there since 1934, in some way, shape, or form, have had delivery of services and some, trash and other things behind the building. So that hasn't changed. I think, what we all would agree has changed is the number of people that are in the area, because the area is doing so great, and there's so many great restaurants and other, establishments to attend. And it's like right now, there's 7 cars parked, behind your place. If your tenant, gets sick and had to come home and didn't have access to, the parking that you built in the front, they'd have to park on the street or go somewhere else. I mean, their parking's not available to them now. And so I think, there's a middle ground where the people that are attached to the commercial businesses there and, the things that they need to conduct their business, and the need for your tenants to have accessible and safe parking and reasonable access to their homes, I believe it can be had without the need to put the paving and the parking in the front. I am very reluctant to consider overturning what HP's recommendation is, not because that I don't appreciate all the good things that you've done and what you've tried to do, but because I feel very strongly that historic preservation guidelines, in spite of the fact that they restrict us sometimes, are for the better good, and that we should abide by that.
Let's hear from HPC for a second.
Could I respond when he...
You may. Go ahead. You may respond now if you want, or...
It might be best just based on what Mr. Austin said. I think you make several good points. Number one, this isn't a precedent. Why? There is not another situation that in the entire district would mirror our situation. 0. So whatever you all do will not have a precedent in the rest of the area. But I think it is important when you look at the findings of the HP and they talk about the catastrophic effects that approval of our drive would have on the HP area, to recognize what we've done is not inconsistent with what you see throughout the area. And when you talk about alternatives, the street is not an alternative because it's a public street and we can't do that. And I submit to you, as you have taken the time and driven and checked it out, what has changed since the 30s is the fact that we now have an end user to the north that has a parking lot that lines up directly with our property and is full most of the time, and we have all this overflow parking that not only goes here, but goes here. So tenants are caught in a situation where they really don't have the choices that they had 20 years ago when, Bob was, working on the property and had other tenants. They could, park in front, and they could...
And I agree that it's more difficult to manage because you've got more people, more congestion, and it's like I say, be careful what you wish for, you may get it. And one of the consequences of having all the success and the establishments there is you do have, but I would contend to you that, there are options, and it is not an unmanageable. It's not a perfect world. I don't think there are perfect solutions, but I don't see it as unmanageable. And I do believe, his tenants and the other residents on 42nd deserve some relief because, I'm usually in bed, but I was surprised at 1 a.m. this Sunday morning, there were still people parked on 42nd. It wasn't parked solid the way it is earlier in the evening, but the establishments were winding down. Your parking lot at Will Rogers Center, had the chain and the sign. But there was still substantial parking on 42nd, and I believe, you and your tenants and other owners have the right to some relief there.
Mr. Tague.
My name is Roland Tague. I'm a member of the HP Commission. A little background on me, I bought in Crown Heights in '74, so I go back. I happen to live on 40th Street. My daughter happened to work at the candy store. I mean, I've been integrated into this whole thing. And I've been on the HP Commission for nearly 10 years. Just a few facts. First of all, when we review applications where the work has been completed, the city ordinance dictates that we disregard that work has been completed. We treat it as if it hasn't been, and we can't hold that against an applicant or in favor of an applicant, one way or the other. And so that's what we do. In terms of the other uses, the other places that you find in Crown Heights where you have people who have put parking in the front, I drove around today, and I think there's about 5 places where, in that whole neighborhood, where somebody has put parking in the front. To the best of my knowledge, in living there that period of time, those events occurred before the adoption, before being included in the HP district. If we allowed ourselves to be persuaded by that kind of evidence, we'd be letting people put new windows in the front of their house. A lot of things that come before us, we have people who do surveys and say, I've looked and there are 40 houses that have certain kinds of surfaces that violate the concrete rule or something like that. And we just have to not use that as our basis, that the precedent of something that might be a violation might have been approved before the current or the guidelines that this was approved under. Another observation is that if you want to see what has been done in terms of parking limitations, all you have to do is go immediately west on 42nd, and there are signs there that restrict parking, but the hours are restricted in such a way that you can see they're aiming at the customers that might be in the restaurants along Western. So there are avenues to do that. I'm sure that Mr. Sullivan is somewhat reluctant because there's probably people parking in front that are going to VZDs. I mean, who's to say where those people are going that happen to be coming there? We do have houses that are on corners, edges. They're next to something that is perhaps not very favorable. Here, he's next to a building that he happens to own. So somebody does have that situation, and we really can't treat that terribly different than the others. Somebody is going to be on the edge. If you treat one on the edge, say, we're going to permit you to do something, then the next person comes along and says, look, I'm next to this change that you permitted, and, where do you stop? So what we looked at, one particular guideline says sidewalks, driveways, off-street parking in residential historic areas should not interrupt the continuity of landscape, front and corner yards, the consistency and repetition of sidewalks and driveway spacing, placement, dimensions, and materials create a rhythm in the street in historic districts. It says sidewalks must be located perpendicular to the street. Historic driveways can be shared. Well, we have a historic driveway here that's shared. Screen parking from the street, pedestrian areas, and residential areas by parking areas at the rear of the sites behind primary structures. I think one of the things that persuaded me most about this, the motion that was made, and I happened to make the motion to deny the application, is that Mr. Sullivan is in a unique situation in that he does have control over a significant amount of parking that could be used to satisfy these two tenants. Signage could be used to prohibit people parking there other than tenants if he wants to give up some of the parking in some of his other lots. And not other people have that same thing. And I have to agree, I'm pleased to see that my neighborhood has grown. I think it's grown pretty responsibly. There are 2 brand-new parking lots that are down by the Will Rogers area that weren't there years ago, that so those particular restaurants have parking there. And then one last thing about historic preservation and the benefits. If you live in an older area like mine, we don't have very good restrictive covenants. We have pretty limited restrictive covenants. Historic preservation guidelines have really provided to neighborhoods that are in that situation some restrictive covenants that they wouldn't otherwise have. And for our neighborhood, I'm sure you could pick people out that don't like it, but by and large, it's been a good thing. Our property values have just soared, and a lot of that, I think, has to do with our historic preservation ordinance. And so I would urge you to sustain the decision of our commission.
When the motion was presented, was it unanimous?
Yes, it was.
Were there any alternatives proposed besides just denial, any aesthetics, any landscaping, anything else that was suggested?
Well, there was existing landscaping there on Mr. Sullivan's property, or it I could never tell whether it happened to be on his property or on the neighbor to his east. The landscaping that he used was to put some small bushes up, so high out in front. And, that's under our way of thinking, putting up landscaping to block the front of somebody's historic house, we'd rather not do that. We want the front of the house to be shown, the side parts of the house to be shown. So to put up a great big hedge so that we block this historic duplex really wouldn't be very satisfactory to the preservationists. And it didn't seem like we had many alternatives, Mark. The alternatives were, I want to park it here, I don't want to dig it up and move it. And so it was like with the signs over there at St. Luke's, there's some alternatives of lowering heights and moving them around and removing them, some negotiations like that. Here, this is a pretty simple thing. Do you park in front or do you not? And there just wasn't much room for maneuvering.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, a couple of things. Number one, and I say this with all due respect to Mr. Tague because he is a friend and a very good lawyer, but I, again, object to him coming and explaining what the HP's thoughts were and why they made a decision. I think he has every right to come as a person that lives within the area and express his own opinion, but as you indicated, this is a de novo hearing, and therefore we have the right to put on evidence, and he has the right to express his opinions. But, with regard to the HP Commission, it was clear from day one that there weren't any alternatives that were going to be acceptable. Now, when Mr. Tague says there's other situations that are just like ours, there are none. There's not one piece of property that has an edge taken out of it like ours does, that part of it is in the HP and part of it is not in the HP. There's not a situation where you have commercial directly to the north and commercial directly to the west. So this is absolutely unique. When you look at the code provides that if you have a unique situation, you all have the opportunity, if you are comfortable with what was done, to approve it and approve it with conditions. Bob has always been willing to put up more hedges or do whatever was appropriate. So from our standpoint, we believe that security is important, there are no alternatives, and we would hope you would allow him to continue to make this duplex operate with tenants in it, because this is what it's going to take.
Dennis, one question. And I know we've argued if they're non-permitted, non-conforming, the other people who have extended their driveway, none of them are surrounded by retail area on three sides, essentially, are they?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. I happen to own a couple of parking lots downtown, and one of the things I can guarantee this commission is that as board members, I mean, you can say you can put up signs, but signs are not going to take care of what the tenants are facing, and that is they're not going to have a place to park, and therefore at some point they're going to move out, and he's going to have this continuing rotation of tenants coming and going. What has changed? Ms. Sullivan told you what had changed. What had changed was the success of Nova and the other uses, VZDs and all the others, have put him in an untenable situation where he has to have parking where his tenants feel safe. So we would ask for whatever support you all could provide. Thank you.
And Rita, just so the record's clear, under Section 594250, it's my understanding that the board has the right to affirm, reverse, or modify the decision of the HPC. And what you're asking, Mr. Box, just so we're clear, is that you're asking that we reverse the ruling of HPC.
That is correct. And if you all have additional conditions, which would deal with, additional landscaping, or whatever you might think is appropriate, Ms. Sullivan will entertain any of those things. Okay. And we offered that at the HP Commission, and it fell on deaf ears.
And Mr. Tegg, you're asking that we affirm the action of the APC. Yes, sir. All right. Is there any other questions, discussions, thoughts? Is there a motion that one of the board members would like to make at this time?
I'll make a motion to deny the applicant's request to overturn the denial of the CA by HP.
Say that again. I want to make sure I follow it. You're asking that the HPC's decision be affirmed by this board?
Yes, and that the application before us today to overturn that is denied.
So the action of the board would be to affirm.
Yes.
To affirm the decision.
The motion is to affirm the decision of the HPC.
One more question. How long has that parking lot been in the front yard?
Since this is on the record, when did you put the parking area in the front yard?
See, this is December. I believe it's like maybe a year ago, last September.
Was a permit obtained or anything like that?
No, sir. I didn't have a curb cut.
So you didn't have to have a permit?
So, no, sir.
About how many square feet of concrete is there?
It's roughly 22 by 28.
Okay.
And when you drive by, there's a grass area, on the north side of it, and then you've got a walkway that comes in.
I've been by, so, yeah.
I can offer one more in regard to square footage. All of the duplexes on the street besides mine have a private drive and in a back parking area with a garage, and they probably have about 1,200 to 1,500 square feet of concrete with the back parking area that I have, and the front one I have about 1,000 square feet of total concrete, since the alleyway is a commercial drive for 4 tenants. So I don't have the luxury of having a driveway like everybody else does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would it be required by the city to remove that concrete?
In the event you all deny his appeal, his option would be to appeal to district court, and if he was not successful there, then he would be subject to citation for doing the work without a certificate of appropriateness.
In result, he would have to remove it.
If that is what the municipal court determined, that it would be then under the jurisdiction of the municipal court if his appeal was denied to district court, if you denied it today.
Board members, we have a motion pending to affirm the HPC decision.
I'm going to go ahead and second it if we don't have one, just so we can vote. Did somebody second the motion?
There's now been a second by you.
Okay. I'll second it so we can vote.
Is there any other further discussion or any further evidence that anyone would like to submit on this appeal at this time? If not, please cast your votes.
So when we cast our vote in the affirmative, we're voting for my motion
To affirm. Green would be to affirm, red would be to reject the motion. The motion is denied.
So you could do another motion because
I make a motion to reverse the decision of the HPC.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Is there any other discussion?
So green would be in favor and red would be against.
the motion. Okay.
Second.